That's great. Thank you, Ali, and hello, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andy Smith, and I am an Appreciative Inquiry facilitator and emotional intelligence specialist. And this webinar today is specifically about how to use the method called Appreciative Inquiry to increase your team's engagement and generally get your team on side with changes. So what we're going to cover very briefly, and there won't be tons of theory here, is what is Appreciative Inquiry, which is often abbreviated to AI in the literature, why solving complex problems needs a strengths-focused approach. I'm going to share 3 principles for successful change. I'm going to show you the 5D format, which is the most commonly used and probably the simplest format for using Appreciative Inquiry. Some specific ways that you can use Appreciative Inquiry for better team working, and we'll also talk about how to use when to use Appreciative Inquiry and when not to. And we'll take questions at the end of the webinar, which should be in about half an hour or so. So if there's any questions you have, please make notes during the webinar so that you've got the questions there to ask at the end. Okay, so let's move on. Some of the common challenges that people face when leading teams of any sort, management team or at a lower level. When a team first comes together, usually it takes a while for people to get to know each other, to find out the best ways to communicate with each other, and to be able to work as a productive team rather than as just a group of people who happen to be working together. If a team has faced or experienced a project that hasn't succeeded, or if they've been going through rough times, if the company's been going through rough times and there have been redundancies, so maybe the people who are left are suffering survivor guilt, how do we restore morale after that? How do you get the team back to feeling motivated and feeling at their best and most resourceful to bring all of their creativity, all of their motivation to work? If there's a specific problem in performance that your team is suffering from, and all of the standard methods of problem solving and analysis haven't worked, or you're getting diminishing returns with those methods, how can we solve that? And not least, even if the team is performing well, how do you engage everyone in the team in working together to improve performance? So to explain Appreciative Inquiry, we probably need to start with the traditional approach, by looking at the traditional approach to change management, which really views organizations as machines and units within that organization, which are essentially made up of people, as cogs in that machine. So in that view, it's very top-down, things don't change much, it's hierarchical, and people are viewed either, as I say, as cogs in the machine or as resources, possibly resources to be strip-mined and used up. So in that way of looking at things, it works pretty well when the environment isn't changing much, when there aren't new technologies coming along, when there isn't new competition coming along, when markets aren't changing. Everyone knows pretty much what they're supposed to be doing. They come in, do their job, go home, and the organization goes on churning out output. But in a changing situation, in a rapidly changing situation such as we have today, where there are new disruptive technologies emerging almost daily, where the cost of transactions is coming down all the time, allowing new entrants into markets, where there's increased globalization, so your potential competition is much wider than it used to be. Organizations need to be more agile than that, and that top-down mechanical way of looking at things doesn't doesn't really work. So in the old metaphor of the organization as machine, the traditional approach to managing change would be look for the problem, analyze where the problem is, do some kind of diagnosis of the problem, and prescribe a solution. And that would usually be prescribed from the top or from the organization being examined by outsiders, for example, management consultants, who very often, by the time the longer-term effects of their prescribed solution begin to work through, they may have moved on, they may be somewhere else. So in a fast-changing world, we perhaps need a different approach to those kind of problems that aren't simple, the kind of problems which happen in a complex system where very often the attempt to solve the problem may cause other knock-on problems in other parts of the system, or maybe a few months or years down the line. So appreciative inquiry arose as a kind of reaction or remedy for this. So what is appreciative inquiry? Well, first of all, it was developed by this guy in the picture, Professor David Cooper-Ryder, who is Professor of Management at the Case Western Reserve University in the States, and his associates, starting in the mid-80s. Cooper-Ryder, for his PhD thesis, was studying an organization called the Cleveland Clinic, a healthcare organization which was known for its excellence. And he started off using all of the metrics of conventional management consultancy. What he found, though, was that these metrics the numbers didn't really come up that different to other similar organizations. They didn't really seem to be capturing the essence of what made the Cleveland Clinic special. He also found that when he was interviewing people about how the organization worked, if he was asking about failures, if they were asked to talk about mistakes, about gaps, about weaknesses, the interviews were very hard work. It was hard to get people to talk because naturally they clam up, they become defensive, they try and cover themselves, and it's just unpleasant for them to talk about failures, deficiencies, gaps. Whereas when he asked them about successes, about achievements, about what they were most proud of, it was actually very hard to get them to shut up. He had a wealth of data, a wealth of really good material. People were happy to talk, happy to open up to him about that. So appreciative inquiry is an approach based on looking at, rather than analyzing problems, it's based on looking at what works, what's already working in the situation, and looking at the conditions that make that possible, putting those conditions in place more often, and doing more of what's working. So if asked to define appreciative inquiry in a sentence, we could use Professor Cooper-Ryder's words: it's the cooperative search in people, their organizations, and the world around them. That cooperative, by the way, is very important because it's about asking everyone involved in the change for their viewpoint. Different people have different viewpoints. No one person, even the guy at the top, has a monopoly on the whole truth of what's happening with an organization. So by hearing those different truths from different perspectives, we gain a fuller picture of what's going on. So unlike conventional problem-solving methods, which involve focusing on the problem, thinking about the problem, trying to analyze it. And when we do that, the more we think about a problem, the more it grows in our attention, until it can seem like there's nothing but the problem. We lose sight of potential solutions around it. And thinking about problems, thinking about what's wrong, it's demoralizing. It can be demoralizing and demotivating. It can make us stressed, it can make us worried, it can make us anxious, which makes it harder for us to think at our best. Studies by positive psychology researchers like Barbara Fredrickson and Alice Eisen have found that when we're feeling good, our cognitive abilities improve. We actually think better. For example, when people are in a positive mood, They see the big picture more easily so that they can think more strategically. They take on information more quickly so that they can reach decisions faster. And they are more resilient, so they recover from setbacks more quickly. So anything we can do to get people into a more positive, generative frame of mind means it's more likely that they will find creative solutions to the problems that they face. So appreciative inquiry is a method for really restoring the balance in what we're looking at when we're attempting to solve problems, so that we get the problem back into perspective and we're remembering what's working and what's good around us, what's good in our performance. That's where we're more likely to find solutions than by analyzing the problem. Now, I should draw a distinction here between problems in a simple system and problems in a complex system. So in a simple system, let's say a light bulb blows, then the solution is easy. You just replace the light bulb. And if that doesn't work, you can trace the electrical circuit back, find the break in the circuit, fix that, and the lights come back on. In more complex systems, however, you get knock-on effects, and very often the attempt to solve the problem will make either that or other problems worse. I could give you an example. For example, Western Europe and America in particular have a sizable problem with drugs, so with illegal drugs. So there are huge amounts of money and effort poured into combating that. Now, one might think that the solution would be simple. Just find the people dealing the drugs and lock them up, take them off the street, which is essentially what they've been trying to do for the last 20 years or so with the so-called war on drugs. Unfortunately, making drugs illegal like that drives up the street price, which makes dealing in them very profitable if you're not caught. And as fast as they take the dealers off the street, there are more guys coming up to replace them. People have an interest in push drugs because they're very profitable, and so the problem goes round and round and round. Simple solutions don't necessarily work in complex systems. Instead, in a complex system, we can look at what's working. We can remember what's working, we can identify what's working, we can identify the conditions for success, and we can build on that. If we do more of what's working, we'll get better results. Let me just use another way of illustrating how appreciative inquiry's results can go beyond the results that you get from problem solving, before we get into practical methods of how you can apply appreciative inquiry with any problems with your team. So if we have a situation where performance is not what it should be, we could apply conventional problem-solving methods to fix that problem. So if our performance is anywhere in this kind of range below acceptable, we can apply conventional problem-solving methods, and that, if we're lucky, if we don't run into any systemic problems or knock-on effects or unintended, fix those problems and restore results to where they should be, the status quo they were before. However, there are some difficulties in that approach. As you try and find out what the problems are in any kind of human organization, you're going to be asking people about it, and people will naturally become defensive if they're being asked about mistakes, about problems that have occurred on their watch. They may try and say as little as possible in order to cover themselves, or even worse, they may try to shift blame somewhere else. Or it could be that if it's a systemic problem, they just simply don't know what the root of that problem is. No one person has enough information to actually find that problem, and maybe you can find it after a huge amount of investigation. Whereas if you're using appreciative inquiry and you're looking at what constitutes good performance, what contributes to it, where you've had exceptional results, then you can actually go beyond the status quo. You can go beyond restoring how things were to generating new possibilities, new ideas, which can actually give you exceptional results more often. The other misconception that people, so I should say appreciative inquiry is not just about, people think sometimes if they've not come across appreciative inquiry before, they may be thinking, well, this is just about ignoring problems, it's about putting on rose-colored spectacles and about sweeping problems under the carpet. It really isn't. It's about addressing known problems in a more realistic way, getting people into a better frame of mind to come up with creative solutions, to think beyond the solution, the way of thinking that created the problem in the first place. One of the quotes that you'll often see attributed to Einstein, I'm not sure whether it's a real one or not, but it certainly makes sense, is we cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking that led to that problem in the first place. So appreciative inquiry is about getting people into a different way of thinking where they're not constrained by the assumptions of the past which may have led to the problems in the first place. So that's one misconception that people have about appreciative inquiry, that it's about ignoring problems or pretending that everything's wonderful when it isn't. It's not. It's about facing up to them in an effective way. The other misconception that people may have about appreciative inquiry, if they aren't very familiar with it, is that it's just a nice kind of touchy-feely way to make people feel good, but doesn't actually address real problems and have a real bottom-line impact. In fact, creating solutions, unleashing people's creativity can have real bottom-line impact. So 3 examples here. O2, which is a mobile phone and telecoms company in the UK, they changed their branding in 2002, and this branding was very effective, very new, very attractive to customers. So lots of customers were signing up, but unfortunately they were finding at that point that their experience of customer service and so on didn't match the branding. So O2 undertook an appreciative inquiry program run by Ashridge Consulting, which improved their customer retention by 32% within 20 months of the program starting. Another example, the US Navy had a big problem in, I think it was the late 90s, with what's called officer churn. In other words, people were signing up as naval officers. The Navy was spending millions of dollars on training them in technical skills, and then a large proportion of these officers were just leaving as soon as their first term was up and going off into civilian life, taking these expensively trained skills with them. So they asked Professor Cooper-Ryder, can we find out why people are leaving and put a stop to it? Cooper-Ryder turned it round and he had them looking into what made people stay. And they conducted an appreciative inquiry process into this, and as a result they saved $2 billion and significantly improved their officer retention. One more example from the very kind of hard end of industry. Steel USA, steel milling company, had a poor safety record. They conducted an appreciative inquiry process into how they can make things safer, when do people feel safest, when have you contributed to safety, and so on. A number of initiatives came out of that, and they were gearing up for a large company-wide meeting known as an Appreciative Inquiry Summit on the subject of improving safety. And before that meeting even took place, before the appreciative inquiry process was completed, their safety record improved by 58%. So appreciative inquiry can have real bottom line impact in the real world. Very, very quickly, and this is as much theory as I want to go into here so that you understand how to use appreciative inquiry, let's look at 3 principles for successful change. First one is, in every human situation, there's something working. No matter how poor a team's performance is, they will be doing some things right. They will be doing some things that are good. And if they identify those, and they build on them and they do more of them, their performance will improve. The reason I have a picture of a teacher and the classroom here is just to remind me to mention a very famous psychology study called the Pygmalion experiment, which happened in the 60s, where Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson did an experiment with elementary schools. Imagine yourself in this situation. You're an elementary school teacher, you're starting at a new school, and they assign you a class and they tell you, these kids, this one, this one, this one, and this one are really bright and advanced, you won't have any trouble with those. And these other kids here, this one, this one, this one, and this one, they're a little bit slow, their schoolwork's not very good, and they're a bit more problematic. And at the end of the first term, results reflected exactly that. The bright kids did really well on their test scores, and the not-so-bright kids did badly. Now, I don't know if they ever told that teacher that actually all of those children had been selected before the experiment to be of average ability. So they went into that experiment of average ability. Their differing results, their good results or their poor results, were just the result of the teacher's expectations. It's very, very hard for somebody to do better and someone they respect or someone in authority is expecting them to. It's very hard for them to get past that ceiling. So if you're a manager, if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're a leader, you may as well expect the best from people and expect that they can do better than they're doing now, so that you're not setting an artificial limit on what they can achieve. Another principle: organizational reality is shaped by conversations, the conversations that people have. A lot of what we deal with in organizations are not actual real physical things like offices or computer equipment. They're not even the number of people we have and their skills on paper. A lot of what we deal with are what's called social facts. In other words, things that are true because everyone agrees that they're true. Money is an example of a social fact. So everyone agrees that that little green piece of paper known as a dollar, a $1 bill, is worth $1 because everyone agrees it is. If people stop believing that, then all of a sudden it would just be a worthless piece of paper. A lot of what we deal with in organizations are things that are true because people agree that they're true. So accounting conventions, for example, sometimes change, and as a result, overnight, companies become more or less profitable than they were the day before. Big accounting convention has changed. In the credit crisis of 2008 or so, prior to that, many banks' balance sheets were significantly boosted by having what were known as credit default swaps in their asset register. So these are very complex financial instruments that nobody actually really understands, and they were valued at a certain amount because people agreed they were valued at that amount. Overnight, people stopped believing that they were worth that, and the values of the banks plummeted, precipitating a crisis. So these social facts are reinforced and kept going by the conversations that people have. So change can happen instantly as soon as you ask a question, because questions place people's attention in a particular direction. When you ask a question, you're inviting the person you're asking to put their attention in a particular direction, maybe somewhere they haven't looked before. So you may as well be asking questions which improve the way that people work together, that will find useful answers, that make the person feel better so they can think better, and so on. Appreciative inquiry, because it asks questions that do that, get people thinking differently. They get them believing that change is possible. So change can happen very rapidly. We can't diagnose a problem within an organization without altering or observing, because as soon as you ask people about stressed, for example, and you ask them, when are you most stressed? What activities do you find most stressful? Which of your colleagues stress you out the most? Even the most easygoing and laid-back person may start thinking, well, actually, I thought I was okay, but thinking about this, I am actually quite stressed. So the way that people think can be changed very rapidly by questions. Finally, we have more confidence in the future when we rediscover and carry forward the achievements of the past. It's not easy to construct a vision of the future from scratch. Starting with a blank piece of paper, you may find that sheet of paper is staring at you, and what to fill it with. It's much, much easier to look at what's working now, what we're proud of, what we've achieved, what we're good at, and take the best of what is now and extend it into the future as a foundation for our vision so that we have some ideas to build on. The other good effect of this is that your future vision, if it's based on what's good now, is actually more credible to people. You don't have to sell it to them because they've already seen examples of that future in action, at least partially, because they have memories and reference experiences of best practice of good things happening already. So they're more likely to believe it can happen in the future. Okay, so let's get down to practicalities. This is the 5D model, which is the most widely used model for appreciative inquiry. So called because it's made up of 5 stages, all of them beginning with D. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as the 4D model because they don't include the definition stage of the topic that you're going to inquire into. So very quickly, definition stage is where you start. It's defining what's called an affirmative topic for you to inquire into. This is something that would be positively stated about what you want rather than about what you don't want. Discovery is looking into the positive core of the organization, what's already working, what's been achieved, what are your strengths, what are you most proud of. The dream stage is a collective imagining of how things could be, so setting a direction for the vision of the future without worrying about the practicalities of could this actually happen or how do we get there. That comes later. When you've established your dream, the design stage is about coming up with ways of getting there, either options of things you could do, actions you could take to get there, or in a larger scale process about how to redesign the business processes and structure of the organization in order to make that dream possible. And finally, the delivery stage, sometimes called or often called destiny stage actually in appreciative inquiry, but I find that businesses find delivery somewhat more understandable as a term. This is the closest to conventional action planning. This is choosing from the options that you've come up with in the design stage, choosing which ones they are, evaluating how to make them work, planning when are they going to happen, what the dependencies are, who's going to carry them out, and so on. And also actually doing it, putting it into practice, and how you're going to learn from that. So the discovery stage, you could go around again and review what worked in what you did in your delivery stage, fix any problems, come up with new ideas, and so on. You could go around that loop a number of times, improving each time. So that's the most widely used model of appreciative inquiry. Let's have a look at how this works in practice. In the defining or definition stage, we would set our affirmative topic for the appreciative inquiry process for what we're going to look into. This is very important because it frames what we're going to look at. So your topic would have to be positively stated, in other words, about what you want rather than about the problem. It would have to be relevant to the people involved in the inquiry and within the power of the people in the room or the people involved in the process to do something about. So if your team's overall time management wasn't very good, rather than looking at why is our time management so bad, the topic might be how do we use our time better, or how do we make the best use of our time. If your team meetings weren't working very well, you wouldn't look at why are our team meetings so awful. You'd be looking at something like, how do we make our team meetings work better, or how do we get the best from our meetings? And the tip here is to start with the words, how can we, and then follow that up by what you want to get to, or how do we, and follow that up by what you want to get to. The next stage, discovery, the heart of this is a process called the appreciative interview. This is a structured conversation, and I'm going to give you some example questions for that in a moment. But just before we do that, in order to make appreciative interviews work, remember, as the interviewer, you're looking for people's best experiences. We're not benchmarking average performance. We're not looking for analysis. We're not looking for the person's opinion. We're looking for stories about their best experiences, because stories are what people understand. Stories are what move people. Also remember, the inquiry is the intervention. Your intervention starts with the inquiry. So the questions and how you ask the questions are very important in beginning to change people's mood and mindset. So, how does an appreciative interview work? Well, if you had a team of, let's say, 8 people, and your topic for inquiry was how do we work together better as a team, what you would do is you would pair people up. And ideally, you'd be pairing people up that don't work together that often, people who come from different roles, people who are at different levels. So you might have, if it was a larger team, you might have CEO interviewing a graduate trainee, for example, or somebody from accounting interviewing somebody from marketing, and vice versa. And you would pair them up, and you would get them to ask each other these questions. What's been your best experience of, in this case, team working? You'll know that you're doing a really good interview when the interviewee loses themselves in the story that they're telling, when they start to feel the same emotions that they felt at the time. You would ask them, what's really important about this experience? What do you value most about it? This will give you some idea of the person's motivations, what the criteria they use to decide whether something is right or wrong, the things that they find important. You could also ask, what enabling factors or conditions were in place that made this experience possible? Was it physical facilities? Was it leadership? Was it team spirit? Was it responding positively to the pressure of a crisis? Was it the ability to communicate face-to-face? What was it? And finally, as a bridge to the future, you could ask, if you had one wish, or 2 wishes, or 3 wishes for yourself, or your team, or your organization in relation to working together well as a team, what would it be? This is where you'd start to get ideas from people about how team working could be improved. The next stage is the dream, and what you would do after those interviews is ask people, what would the perfect achievement of, in this case, working together well as a team be like? Ideally, you're after kind of metaphorical thinking here. You're asking them to think with the right side of their brains. You're asking them to think creatively. And of course, in any group there are going to be some extroverts who like speaking out, and going to be some introverts who prefer to have a little bit of time to think. So in order that those introverts aren't excluded, get them first of all individually to imagine what that deal would be like, and get them to jot some ideas around, get them to share those ideas one by one so everyone gets a hearing, and then as a team depict a future with perfect outcomes. So it might be it's 2 years' time, and your division is recognized as the best in the organization for team working. Get them to come up with some kind of presentation, artwork, playlet, whatever, something that's very quick and easy to deliver but makes them think. Get them to come up with something like that, and get them perhaps to present it to other groups in the room. And they could also develop a slogan or statement that sums up their dream and acts as a reminder and also as an ideal to aspire to. just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that we could do, this is a guy on one of my courses, and his team has dressed him up as a tree depicting something or other, an unshakable belief, I think, that's deeply rooted with various things written on the branches. And as you can see, he's enjoying himself there, which typically is what happens during one of these appreciative inquiry processes, because people can think in a different way and enjoy themselves. In the design stage, based on what you've uncovered about the best of what is, based on where you've defined in your team, think about ideas, action processes, changes to systems, things that you could do that could help bring your dream or some aspect of that dream future vision into reality. You're not committing to any of these ideas at this stage. All ideas are good ideas. You're just coming out with as many possibilities as you can, because those possibilities are there to choose from in the final stage, the delivery stage, which is about taking those options, selecting the best ones, perhaps evaluating them, and putting them into some kind of plan for going forwards, including, crucially, how are you going to measure your successes? What are the key performance indicators? How will you learn from what you do so that it's better next time? And you can put together a high-level action plan very quickly and just refine the details later. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the 5D model. There is a lot more about appreciative inquiry and different formats and ways of implementing 5D and other formats for appreciative inquiry on my blog at coachingleaders.co.uk. I just want to say about this 5D model that it's not a one-way process. So it's not like once you finish the discovery process, you can't revisit it, because you may find in the discovery process that what you thought was the problem and what you thought was the topic to work on either was just the bit that showed above the surface and actually the problem is wider, or it may be that the problem is smaller and it's just one particular aspect. So you could go back based on what you've discovered and refine your topic. When you formulated your dream vision of the future, you could go back to the discovery stage and look for where some aspects of that dream are already happening in the present, and so on. So it's a roadmap just to tell you where you are in the process. It's not a rigid one-way process. So, question I'd like to leave you with before I take your questions and start answering them. First of all, what are you going to do differently as a result of what you've learned about appreciative inquiry? I should also say you don't have to go through a full-blown 5D process in order to start looking at things in an appreciative way. For example, you could get a better result from your team meetings, perhaps by just simply asking at the beginning of the team meeting, asking people to share what successes they've had that week or that month, depending on how often you meet. Or even simpler than that, at the end of the meeting, you could ask, what did we do well in this meeting? And just see what happens. I encourage you to find out more about appreciative inquiry. There's plenty out there on the web. There are lots and lots of resources at what's called the Appreciative Inquiry Commons website, which is appreciativeinquiry.case.edu. There's plenty of stuff about appreciative inquiry on my blog at coachingleaders.co.uk, and actually I think I'll be posting reposting some of those articles in the Mile Community Emotional Intelligence group as well, because it's a more emotionally intelligent way of working. So in conclusion, I'd like to say you are better than you think you are. Your team is better than you think it is. Your organization is better than you think it is. So start looking for what's working, start looking for what's good in your organization's performance, and start building on it. Okay, thank you very much.